Okay, good evening everybody, and welcome to the start of the Monday night Shir. And nice, one of the original names they wanted to call it was the winter class, the winter series. So I see the weather has played ball and made it nice and cold, so you can certainly feel that it's a winter class and a winter series. The topics are going to be the Parsha of the week, so it might be advantageous to you to have a chumash with you, and therefore we can go through some of the things that I like to talk about. There are obviously many different ways of doing a shir like this, so hopefully you will like the way that I do it. If not, I suppose you can vote with your feet, as they say. But thank you very much to Mr. Friedman and Abe, for organizing all of this. Thank you very much, and to Dory for sending out all the information. And it's great to see so many people here in time for the shir. So if we turn to page 416 in the Chumash, and we start this week's Parsha Ve'ela HaMishpatim, and these are technically the laws. So it says here the audiences. So the first question we have is the strange expression, Ve'ela HaMishpatim asher tosim lifneihem. These are the laws which you shall place before them. This is a very strange expression. We don't find anywhere else in the Torah that Hashem uses or tells Moshe to use this expression of Tosim Lifneihem. We have Vayedaber Hashem el Moshe Lemar. Hashem says to Moshe, Daber el Bnei Yisrael, speak to the Bnei Yisrael. We had at the end of last week's Sedra, Koisoi Mar el Bnei Yisrael, go talk to them. We have another expression is Vatatzavem el Bnei Yisrael. God commanded Moshe to go and command to tell the Jews whatever laws it is. But we don't find the expression Tosim Lifneihem. Now the word Tosim means to put. We have by Binyamin when Yosef wanted to put the goblet in the sack of Binyamin, he said Tosim, place the golden goblet, or silver goblet rather, in the sack of Binyamin. So we have the word Tosim in the Torah. But the only time that we find the word Tosim Lifneihem, or the idea of the word Tosim, is by Eliezer, the servant of Avram. When he goes to find a wife for Yitzchak, he makes the miracle, or he doesn't make the miracle, but he asks, Shem makes the miracle at the well. Rivka comes and they have this whole sign that she says, I'll give your camels to drink as well. And he goes back to Besuel, the parents, and it says, Vayusom lefanov le'echel, they placed before him to eat. So you find this idea of Tosim and lefanov, before him. So Rashi therefore compares the two, and he says, Tosim lifneim k'shulchan ha'aruch. So you find the word Tosim by food. It says the idea here by these laws, you need to place them like you place food in front of somebody, i.e. a laden table, everything perfectly explained. Now it's very ironic in my opinion, because of all the things to say that you should set out perfectly in front of them like a laid out table, these mishpatim, these statutes, are certainly not something you would say nowadays are easily laid out in front of them. These laws, the laws of money, the laws of ownership, have been fought about for thousands of years. You have most of the Gemara is centered on these Pesukim, Mishpatim. So if anything is in front of you like a laid out table, everything's perfect, this is not it. So I think it's very ironic. Maybe Hashem has a sense of humor, I don't know. But it's very ironic that the one thing he says, make sure everybody knows inside out perfectly easily, is the one thing that today we have, unfortunately, lots of debate and, I wouldn't say controversy, it's probably the wrong word, but difference of opinion and so on. So I find that very ironic. But I'd like to discuss for a few minutes, when did this take place? When did these laws that are given out here in this week's Sedra, when did they take place? Because we are quite in the middle of something interesting over here. We started off in last week's Sedra, Parshas Yisro. If we go back to when they came to Mount Sinai, which can be found on page 400, B'chodesh Hashlishi, the third month, Sivan, they came to Har Sinai. Then it talks about Moshe went up, he went down, he went up, he went down, and on what we believe is the 6th day of Sivan, we got the 10 Commandments. That's how, so far, the chronological order of the Parsha goes. He went, they had these backwards and forwards, they went up to Har Sinai. Then we had the 10 Commandments. As soon as the 10 Commandments are finished, the very end of Parshas Yisro, page 412, Vayom Hashem el Moshe, Hashem says to Moshe, Ko som al b'nei Yisrael, go tell the Jews, you saw me, Lo sasun iti Elohei chesed v'Elohei zahav, don't make for yourself silver gods, gods of stone, gods of whatever it is, any other foreign gods, and you shouldn't make a mizbeach, an altar out of iron, and v'lo saleh b'malus al mizbechi, you mustn't use steps. So if we're going chronologically, it seems Moshe Rabbeinu went up the mountain. We had this revelation of Har Sinai. Then God tells him, mustn't have idols. Then we have all these laws of Parshas Mispatim. Then, at the end of Parshas Mispatim, page 440, we get to an interesting discussion. Vel Moshe Omar Alei El Hashem. To Moshe, he said, go up to Hashem, you come up to me, and it goes through the Parsha, the famous Naaseh v'Nishma, the famous expression the Jews said, we will do, and then we will hear more. Moshe made this whole altar, and he offered sacrifices, and the Jews accepted the Torah. And then it says Moshe went up the mountain covered him for 6 days, and we know he was there for 40 days, the end of the Sedra, Pasuk Yud Ches, 442 at the bottom. Vahi Moshe Bahar, Moshe was in the mountain, Aboim Yom V'Aboim Loila, 40 days and 40 nights. So it's a little bit confusing here. On the one hand, Parshas Yisro, we have the 10 Commandments, then we have all of this, and then at the end, he goes up. So did he go up? Did he come down? When did Hashem teach him the laws of Mishpatim? When did he tell the Jews these laws? What on earth is the chronological order of these paragraphs? So, as I said before, despite the fact that Hashem says, Tosim lifneihem, you should put it before them like a laid out table, everything perfect, of course there is a debate about the chronological order of how all these events worked out. We have, on the one side, we have the Ramban, Nachmanides, we have the Ibn Ezra, and we have somebody else who I've just momentarily forgotten. And then, and the Klei Yaakov, if you say so. And then on the other hand, we have Rashi and the Medrash, who are on the other side of the debate. So what are the two sides? So, according to the Ramban, as we say, he said the events are in chronological order. That means the Naaseh v'Nishma at the end of Mishpatim, the famous Naaseh v'Nishma was uttered after the 10 Commandments, which is very strange. We'll get to that later. So that means they came to Har Sinai. Moshe went up, he went down, he told them, no, board up Har Sinai, build the wall, as we have all over the news at the moment. And then he went up, he got the 10 Commandments. Then, whilst he was having the 10 Commandments, God told him all of this. He came down, told the Jews all of this, because it says he came down and he told them what Hashem said. It says, he came down, he said what Hashem said. Vayovo Moshe, this is now page 440, getting confusing, I know. But that's why I say we can have the Chumash. We're on page 440, chapter 24, verse 3. Vayovo Moshe, Vayesaper la'om, eis kol divrei Hashem, ve'eis kol ha'mishpatim. So that means, we're now, according to the Rambam, which is after the 10 Commandments, God obviously, when he was up the mountain, receiving the 10 Commandments, well, he didn't bring down the 10 Commandments till later, 40 days later, but when he was hearing them, God also told him all these laws of Mishpatim. He then came down again, told them all to the Jews, and then obviously went back up again, and he stayed there for 40 days. That's according to the Ramban. Up, down, like a yo-yo. And this was all said, so it must have been a long day, because he had all these laws, first of all, to learn. He had to learn them all. Not just learn them, you had to understand them, because Hashem didn't just say tell them, he said lay it out perfectly so they know it inside out. So he had to learn it and understand it. Then he had to come down to 3 million people and discuss it all and explain it to them. And then he had to go back up for 40 days and he learned the rest of the Torah. He was there in the heavens and so on and so forth. So, and of course, they also had this whole procession of Naaseh v'Nishma. He set up all these altars. That must have taken time. He slaughtered all these offerings. He took the blood, threw it over the Jew. A busy day, right? We're having Shavuos. We're coming in on Yom Tov. We're hearing the Ten Commandments. But this must have been one of Moshe Rabbeinu's busiest day, on par with the last day of his life, when he was supposed to have written 12 Sifrei Torah. So you know how long it took us here to write 96 letters. It took us like 2 hours to write 96 letters. If there's 308,412, whatever it is, letters, times that by 12, right? So you're talking about 4 million letters he's writing, 4.5 million letters, right? Can you times that by the amount of time it took him to write that? He's talking about a long day. So maybe it's like the days that some people say at the creation of the world, the sun and the moon were not created till day 4. So what were these first few days? There is a passage which says that 1,000 days of Hashem is like yesterday. We say it every Shabbos. Kiyom Esmol Kiyava, that 1,000 Shonim Kiyom Esmol, 1,000 years is like yesterday for Hashem. So some people say the first 3 days of the creation were 1,000 years, because he didn't have the sun and the moon for 24-hour days. So maybe Moshe Rabbeinu's last day also went on for 1,000 years, because he had all these millions of letters to write. But or maybe he was one. I've seen it. I had a guy when I was in yeshiva who could write with both hands at the same time different things. So he could write with one hand like this and the other hand like this. So maybe Moshe could write with all his fingers, So he could have, I suppose you'd have to have the parchments in different places, all very well like this, but maybe you'd have, I don't know. But so maybe he was able to do it in double quick time, literally, because he was able to use one hand, or maybe he was able to use his mouth too. So he was able to, so they sort of did it in a third of the time. But anyway, so Moshe Rabbeinu was a busy guy. He crammed a lot into his days. I know we like to cram a lot of stuff into our days now that we've retired. People say they've never been as busy as they have been when they're retired. And he got a long way to go till he catch up to Moshe Rabbeinu when he had plenty to do. So this was a busy day for Moshe, if we go according to the chronological order of events, which leads to a few problems. Then you have Rashi. Rashi says, when it says back to page 440, when he says he told Moshe to go up, what does Rashi say? Rashi says, Parsha zu nemra kodem aseres hadibros. These paragraph of Moshe Rabbeinu coming down, telling the Jews the laws that he heard, making all these altars, making all this blood and sprinkling them over the Jews, was said before the Aseret Dibros, B'Dalad B'Sivan, on the 4th day of the month of Sivan, because don't forget, Moshe went up, and Hashem said, you've got 3 days to prepare yourself. Al Tikshu Elisha, don't have relationships with a woman, because you need to have 3 days of purity. So he had 3 days to relax. And in those days is the days that he was able to build the altar, and he was able to do all of this. So according to Rashi, it comes out that he wasn't so busy. He did all this that was said here before Matan Torah. They said Naaseh v'Nishma before they heard the 10 Commandments, because this was before the 10 Commandments. They heard Naaseh v'Nishma, and according to Rashi, again, it's going to get complicated. In last week's Sedra, the Jews said, Kol asher dibah Hashem Naaseh. Everything Hashem said, we will do. And here it says Naaseh v'Nishma. So according to Rashi, it's one and the same. They never said 2 times, we'll do, and the next time they said, we'll do and listen. According to Rashi, it's one and the same. Why didn't it say Naaseh v'Nishma last time? Is beyond the scope of this drasha. But it is something that is, this Rashi was the same. When they said last week Naaseh, it refers to this Naaseh v'Nishma. According to the Ramban, they said 2 things. Before Matan Torah, they said, we will do, and after Matan Torah, they said they will Naaseh v'Nishma. But according to Rashi, it's one and the same. So everything was done before. Wait a minute. Then Moshe went up, heard the 10 Commandments. Then he stayed there for the 40 days, and then he came down with the tablets of the luchos, smashed them, went back up again. Then he came back down 40 days later, got new tablets, went back up. 40 days later, came back down with the second set of luchos, and then was Yom Kippur. And then he had time at a later time, some point in the future, to tell the Jews whatever is recorded in this week's Parsha. Is one way of understanding.
May I have a question?
Yes.
At the same time, when Moshe Rabbeinu talked to them and they said Naaseh v'Nishma, the Torah says that he renewed the covenant with them.
Right.
So what I'm asking, does Rashi say it? When did that happen?
Oh, excellent question. Well, it's not when did it happen, because he said that happened before. But what was the covenant?
Also happened.
Yes, that all happened before Matan Torah.
Yeah,
Right. So the question is, what covenant did they know before Matan Torah?
Okay.
Well,
Good question.
They knew the bris milah.
Right.
That was the covenant that Rashi says. That was a covenant that was renewed at that point.
Right. So there is,
Three things Rashi mentions at that point.
yes, the Porah Aduma, Shabbos, and
Correct.
Dinim.
Correct.
So if you look back a few weeks, I was going to say this a little bit later, but we'll say it now, that when they came after they crossed the Red Sea, or the Reed Sea as it should be, it says Hashem gave them choik mishpat. Hashem gave them chukim and mishpat. So Rashi said, what did he teach them? The mitzvah of Porah Aduma, the mitzvah of Shabbos, and Dinim, which is a very open-ended thing to say. Calls them mishpatim. Choik mishpat. Mishpat is the same as this week's Parsha, Eile HaMishpatim. So according to some people, this Parshas Mispatim was said weeks ago, after they crossed the sea, when Hashem told them about Shabbos, he told them these Mishpatim too. So according to some people, Mishpatim was already said weeks ago. Yes, well, maybe we'll keep questions at the end, because otherwise we'll lose the train. So, we have three different interpretations when Parshas Mishpatim was actually said. According to the Ramban and the Ibn Ezra, it was said straight, it was told to Moshe on the day of the Ten Commandments were given. He came down and told the Jews on that day, on the 6th of Sivan, or the 7th of Sivan, because it was delayed, on the day of the Ten Commandments, Parshas Mishpatim was given. We'll talk about that soon. That's according to the chronological order. Then you have two more interpretations. You have Rashi who said that Mishpatim was not given straight after the Ten Commandments, because he explains that this parsha at the end was given before. So in the idea that Mishpatim was not said on the day of the Ten Commandments, you have two ideas. One is that it's, according to Rashi, this was the Mishpatim said in Parshas B'Shalach 2 weeks ago, when they were told in Marah, the place called Marah, when they came after they crossed the sea, they came to this bitter place. They had no water to drink, so they had plenty of free time because they didn't need to eat and drink. So they learned Parshas Mishpatim. Whereas according to other opinions, Mishpatim was said at a much later time. It could have been, who knows when. After Moshe Rabbeinu came down, after Yom Kippur, he had 40 days or 120 days that he learned the whole Torah, and he went about telling them all the various laws. So
Marah occurred before.
Oh, that everybody agrees. Yes, Marah occurred well before Matan Torah. Yeah, about a month before maybe. If they crossed the sea on Shvi Shel Pesach, which is like the 21st, 22nd of Nisan.
So by Matan Torah, it was already decreed Moses isn't going over.
Oh, no. He hit the rock much later. That was later on. That was a different place. That was where did he hit the rock? That was in Parshas Chukas. Where was that? He hit? Hold on. Where did he hit the rock? Refidim is where Amalek came. Parshas Chukas, where were they? Hold on. He says, where it doesn't say where they were.
But that's the second one.
Doesn't say where they were. Oh yes, what's her name died? Where did Miriam die? So this was after Miriam died. And where were they when Miriam died? Okay, whatever. But this was much later on, where Moshe Rabbeinu was by Thomas Shom Miriam. Miriam died over there. So this is where Kadesh. This was in Kadesh, place much further on. Okay, so that was a later time. So I have a question for you. According to the opinions that say Na'aseh v'Nishma was uttered after they knew most of all of now. Let's have a look in Parshas Mishpatim. If you're going to say that Na'aseh v'Nishma was after the Ten Commandments, they knew the Ten Commandments, obviously, the most important ones, because they heard them. They knew about Shabbos. Everybody agrees they heard the laws of Shabbos before, and they're also in the Ten Commandments. And if they knew Mishpatim, there's a lot of stuff in this week's Parsha. They knew about laws between people and people. They knew about not lending with interest, which is something I think people would be very important to hear. Oh, we can't lend with interest. Whoops. So they knew all about that. They knew about all the festivals, because all the festivals are in this week's Parsha. They knew about giving tithes, rashis, bikuri ad mazcha. You got to take bikurim. They knew about not having meat and milk, because it says, Lo Savashel Gidi B'Chalei V'Mo. Whoops, we can't have our cheeseburgers anymore. They knew that they had to have only certain selected animals. There's only certain animals you can eat. They knew all of those things, the things that people find hard. They knew about giving tzedakah. They knew about helping out your enemies. They knew about all this sort of stuff. They knew about serving idols is a capital punishment. They learned all about the dinim of lending and loans and how to help people and servants and all this sort of stuff. So if they knew most of this, what is the big shtick? What is the big, the Jews had Nashav and Ishmael. They didn't know what they were getting themselves in for. They said, whatever we hear, we're going to listen. But they knew most of it already. According to the opinions that say it was after Matan Torah, after they heard Parshas Mispatim, they knew most of it. They knew most of what they were getting themselves in for. They knew the difficult bits anyway. So what didn't they know? They didn't learn about the korbanos. They didn't learn about the sexual impropriety laws and things. So, all right, so those are the things they didn't know. But most of the stuff is here already. So, if you're going to say they said Naasev and Nishma afterwards, what's such a big thing about it? Why is Naasev and Nishma lauded as this amazing thing they said? We don't know what we're getting ourselves in for, but we're going to go ahead anyway. And they knew most of it. So, on that, there is a couple of answers, and I would like to suggest something myself. One answer is Naasev and Nishma, is that they knew a lot, but they didn't necessarily know how much more was to come. Who knows how much more was to come? They had a blind faith. Yeah, we know a lot, but there's a lot more to come. Whatever is to come, whatever more is to come, whatever you throw at me, I'm going to keep it. So that is still a blind faith, because you don't know what Hashem was going to say. Hashem would have said, you can't eat, or you got to sit in the shoebox, or whatever. Whatever, they didn't know what could have happened, could have all these draconian laws. I say draconian in inverted commas, of course. There could have been things that they didn't know what was coming, and they still were prepared to take it on. That's why, could have been anything. Naasev and Nishma is so lauded because they could have submitted themselves to anything, even though they knew a lot, but they still didn't know what was to come. So that's one interpretation. I would like to suggest something a little bit different, because the word Nishma can also be an idea of understanding. Because let's say when we say Shema in the morning, Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad, Shema has 4 connotations. Hear, listen. You've got to listen to what you're hearing to really hear it. Obey and understand. Those are the 4 things you're supposed to think about when you say Shema in the morning. So Shema can also be an idea of understanding. And perhaps the idea of Naasev and Nishma is the idea of we will do and then we will understand later. So even if we don't understand what we're doing, we're still going to do it. Which is why the phrase about a person should do it shelo lishma, even if he doesn't realize what he's doing, or even if he's not doing it for the right reasons, he should still do the mitzvahs. Do action, do something, and then you understand later. Because unfortunately in the world at large, people say, well, if you don't I'm only going to do something if I understand it. I don't understand it, it makes no sense to me, and therefore I'm not going to bother keeping it. This is ridiculous. How am I going to understand this? I'm not going to keep these laws. So I think that is one of the ideas of Naasev and Nishma. We're just going to do. No matter if we understand or we don't understand. V'nishma. Later, we'll try and understand what's going on. But first we will do, no matter whether we understand or not. So that perhaps is an explanation of why Naasev and Nishma was so special. But that's very interesting. So we have 3 ideas of when this Parshas Mishpatim was said. But regardless of whichever opinion you want to take as to when Mishpatim was uttered, we still need to understand why either it was chosen to be the first set of laws that Hashem chose to tell them on the day of Matan Torah, and if it wasn't the first set of laws because they were taught at a later date, why does the Torah choose to plunk them in right in between Matan Torah? If you're going to say it's not in the right order, it's even more of a question. Why are we interrupting Matan Torah? We're interrupting the revelation of Har Sinai to tell you all these laws, the laws of slaves, the laws of tzedakah, all this sort of stuff. Why was that interrupted? What is special? What can we learn from the juxtaposition of these laws, these interpersonal laws, with Har sort of flanked on either side by the revelation of Har Sinai? So I think the answer, as Rashi brings it down, and a lot of people discuss it, is very obvious. Man to man, right? Bin Adam Lachaveru. Because people can obviously make the error in thinking that Judaism is only about man and God. I'm going to be holy, I'm going to be so spiritual, I'm going to be really head in the clouds, as we'll talk about Moshe Rabbeinu shortly. But how I treat my fellow man, that doesn't matter. I can still do what I want. God doesn't care. What doesn't matter to me? I'm praying 3 times a day. I have the Beth Shmona Esrei. I learn with you. But what I do with people is it doesn't matter. And obviously comes to Torah and says, no. The most important thing is how you get on with people. Yes, the first thing is don't make idols. The first thing after matter, don't make idols. Of course, you're going to make idols, then what's the point of listening to God if you're going to have other gods? So first of all, you mustn't have other gods. That's the most important. But after that, you've got to know how to get on with people, because we live in the world. God chose, for whatever reason, to create a world for us to be as humans, for us to get on with people, to serve Him in this world, and we have to get on with people. We have to be able to understand how to get on with people, and that is very pleasing to Hashem. And it's also not just the fact that we have to know how to get on with people, but this is just as important. We're going to juxtapose, we're going to stop the revelation of Har Sinai, we're going to stop the 10 Commandments, tell you these laws, to show you that these are just as important. How you treat somebody, the laws, the courts, the dinim as it's called, the laws of man and man, are just as important as the laws pertaining to Shabbos, the laws pertaining to Hashem, and whatever laws they entail. They are just as important, if not more important. In fact, we know by Yom Kippur that on Yom Kippur we spend all day asking for forgiveness, but we can only ask for forgiveness from Hashem from sins that we commit to Hashem. Sins that we commit to other people, Hashem said, well, it's not my business. I can't forgive on His behalf. I can't forgive you because of what you did to somebody else. You have to go and ask Him for forgiveness, because that is between you and Hashemayim, Shemayim and Hashem. The heavens are for Hashem. V'oretz nosan livnei Adam. The earth He gave to man. We've got to know how to get on with people, how to react with people. And that's very important. However, the Klei Yoka says a very also simple explanation. What was the last of the 10 Commandments? What was the last of the 10 Commandments?
Don't covet.
Don't covet. Don't be jealous. What do you not be jealous of? Sodeyu, his field, his Eved, and his wife, and his house. So, if you're going to tell me not to covet other things that belong to people, you've got to tell me the laws of what belongs to people. If you look at Mishpatim, you've got to learn who owns what, how he owns what, the laws of borrowing, the laws. So, I've got to know how you own something, how you have a slave. How on earth do I have a slave? You tell me not to covet somebody else's slave. What is this slave? How does he own a slave? How can I buy a slave? So you've got to know. So it's all an extension of the 10th commandment, which is do not covet something that does not belong to you, which is something that, again, is a drasha all in itself, the whole explanation of that, and so on. Although I may mention something about that soon, about do not covet. But anyway, so that is according to Klei Yoka, the juxtaposition, because we need to know how you own something, how you acquire stuff, in order to know how not to covet it, and how not to go about taking it over from somebody else. So that's the beginning. Now we understand, or we at least know all the difference of opinions as to when this took place. So there's a few other little things, little tidbits as I call it, that I'd like to talk about. The laws of, the dietary laws, eating laws, are prefaced. Very strange. It talks about, Anshe Kodesh Tihi Onli, let me find it. Men of holiness you should be for me. Here we go. We're on page 432, chapter 22, verse 30. You should be men of holiness. You can't eat an animal that's been torn away in the field. You throw it away to the dogs. So we find the idea of dietary laws is prefaced by this idea of you are holy. Again, in Parshas Shemini, where we learn about the laws of what animals you can eat, what you can't eat, the creepy crawlies. Again, the Yisem Kadoshim, you should be holy. Again, this idea of food connects it with being holy. It doesn't talk about holy, except for the, again, with sexual impropriety, it talks about being holy, and there's obviously a connection between those two. But why does it say about being holy by food? It doesn't say by Shabbos it says you keep the Shabbos day holy. The Shabbos day is holy, that's why you keep it. But it doesn't say, you are holy, so you keep the Shabbos. You are holy, so you keep tzedakah. It doesn't say that. It talks about the dietary laws. So Reb Shimshon Raphael Hirsch lived at the time at the Haskalah movement, when the Enlightenment movement in Germany. And apparently one of the big claims was against the dietary laws. People said, the only reason why the Torah forbade certain animals, and the only reason why we can't have milk and meat together, and the only reason why we can't have anything to do with birds that claw and birds that attack other birds, is health reasons. In the old days, these things were not healthy, these things were not good for you, so the Torah said, stay away from it. But now, life is different, these things don't affect people so much, we have medicine has evolved, people have evolved, so we don't need to keep the dietary laws, we don't need to bother not having milk and meat together, we can do what we want because life and so on has moved on. So that's why, says Rav Shimshon Raphael Hirsch, his response to these people was, that's exactly why the Torah prefaces the laws with V'anshe Kodesh Tihiyunli. It's about holiness, nothing to do with being healthy. It's nothing to do with what's right, what's good for you, or what's dangerous. Nothing to do with that. Because if it was, then maybe you're right. If you had new breakthroughs in medicine, you wouldn't have to bother. In fact, I could show you in the Shulchan Aruch. A lot of people don't eat fish together with meat. Why? Not because of any halachic reason, but the Gemara says it was dangerous for Saras, that the combination of meat and fish together would cause certain illnesses. So there is a Tosfos brings down, which is quoted in the Mishnah Berurah, that says nowadays, I don't know if I should say this or not in public, but anyway, it says nowadays one doesn't need to be so careful with it because it uses the word nishtanu hatavim. The bodies, the people's nature have changed, and therefore these combinations do not produce the same type of illnesses as they used to do. The Gemara talks a lot about having water left overnight, you can't drink, all these things. I think they produce bacteria and so on and so forth. So a lot of these things which are not halachic things from the Torah. So therefore, what is a halacha, what is a law written down, you can't change, as we've just said, V'anshe Kodesh Tihiyunli. But the Gemara was talking about certain things to do with health and safety. So he and the Tosfos and his quoted Mishnah will bring down that because the DNA and the bodies have changed, it doesn't matter so much. Although I don't think people practice this nowadays. People are still very particular about it, and they still have separate stuff for meat and fish. They don't cook them together. But you see the idea that even with these things, that if the circumstances change, then the bodies change and the humans change, then certain things don't apply. So that's what they were saying to Reb Shimshon Raphael Hirsch. Meat and milk doesn't apply anymore, it's not a problem, it's not dangerous, and that's how he would respond to them. Ve'anshe kodesh tihiyunli. This is something to do with holiness. It's nothing to do with health and safety in any way, shape or form. Now, a couple of other things. We talk about the dietary laws. We have page 436, chapter 23, verse 19. Reishis bitkure ad masach, the beginning of your first fruits. Tavi beis Hashem elekecha. You got to bring to Hashem bikurim, the first fruits that you start bringing already on Shavuos. Then lo savashel gedi b'chalevi mo. You cannot cook a kid in its mother's milk. Now this is mentioned 3 times. It's mentioned in 2 weeks' time in Parshas Kisisa. It says also right at the end in the laning that we lane on a Shabbos Chol HaMoed. We say again, the same expression. And again in Parshas Kiseitze, I think it is, says the same thing. You cannot cook basically meat and milk together 3 times. So the rabbis tell us why 3 times. One is to tell you cannot eat it. One is to tell you cannot have benefit from it. And the third one is to tell you cannot even cook it, which is the only treif thing that you cannot cook. If you have a piece of treif of meat, you're allowed to cook. You can't eat it, and you shouldn't use your own pots, but you're allowed to cook treif of meat for other people to eat. But milk and meat, you cannot even cook, which is why it's a problem being a chef. they say that Jews shouldn't work in non-kosher restaurants or whatever. That's exactly why. Because basar v'chalav, not just about eating, it's not about owning, it's not about having benefit. It's also about cooking. You're not even allowed to cook it. So that's why because most restaurants, I'm guessing, will have some sort of meat and milk cooking together. And that's why. So if it's a non-kosher animal, you could go ahead and cook it. Not in your own stuff and don't eat it, but you could cook it for somebody else. Somebody says to you, hey, come be my chef. I'll pay you. Come and cook me a meal. If it's just meat, you can do it. If it's just milk, the rabbis say one shouldn't get involved in these things because, when people are cooking, what the first thing they do, they want to taste it. How does this taste? Do I have enough salt, enough spices, and you're going to taste it. That's what most people do. When we're cooking on a fast day, how hard it is. So, got to remember not to taste it. So the rabbis say, don't get involved in non-kosher food because the likelihood is you're going to taste it. But me'ikar hadin, strictly speaking, you're allowed to cook non-kosher meat, non-kosher food, except for this basar v'chalav. It's very serious. But, and I'm going to say but again, according to the halach, it's only kosher meat, doesn't have to be shechted. So it's a kosher animal with milk. So technically, if it was something that you were cooking, I don't know what's a non-kosher animal, horse or camel, I don't know what other non-kosher animals people eat a lot of, but technically that would be allowed to cook that with milk. It's only kosher animals. Doesn't have to be slaughtered correctly. It's any kosher animal. Is a prohibition of cooking its meat in milk. Now, Reb Shimshon B'Fol Hirsch explains that this is to do, we have a lot of laws pertaining to forbidden mixtures. We can't have wool and linen mixed in together. We can't, when we're plowing, we cannot use two different species of animals. So if you're plowing, you can't have a horse and a cow, or an ox and a sheep or something. You can't use two separate species of animals. When you plant, you can't graft two different type of... there is, a nectarine, I think, is something that's combined, am I right? A nectarine is... Right, so you can eat them, right, but you couldn't necessarily yourself go and plant nectarines, or maybe if you took nectarine seeds that have already grown from somewhere else, it's different. Also, a mule, I think, is a hybrid, but now they have their own genes, so it's moved on since then. But there's a whole thing of cross-contamination of species, and it goes back to the beginning, Parshas Bereshis. If you go back to Parshas Bereshis, everything says many times the word lemina, to its own kind, even the plants. When the plants, the desha, the grass, right? Vatotza is desha, the vatotza or it's desha. This is now page 4, chapter 1, verse 12. I'll read in English. And the earth brought forward vegetation, vegetables, herbage, yielding seed after its kind. The Gemara tells even the grass. You can have different types of grass. I know here we have sawgrass and this grass and that grass. Even the grass, when Hashem made it, everything came out leminehu, to its species. Everything leminehu, everything came out. Here, when the wild animals came out, ve'eis kol konof leminehu, the birds, they were made according to that. They stay with their species. So the same is with milk and meat. Even though milk is technically the same species of meat, it comes from the same animal. So I'm not quite sure how I understand it, but I'm doing the nasa, I'm doing the doing. I'm telling you before I fully understand it. Practicing what we preached many years ago. So it's something that is to do with cross-contamination. You take the meat of the animal and you don't contaminate it with the milk. Although technically it's different animals, I suppose. One is the gedi and the mother. It's a separate animal, so it has there. But he talks about the idea that this is a cross-contamination of species, which is why it's forbidden. I just want to finish off. I know it's trying to speak for 45 minutes, and if people have questions. Moshe Rabbeinu, where did he go? Where did he go? If I said to you, Moshe went for 40 days, where did he go? Where did he go? Where was he on the mountain? Was he in heaven? Where did he go? Anybody?
Both.
You say he was in heaven?
Both. Above the clouds.
He was above the clouds? So that's how most people would tell you. Yes, he went up the mountain. Some people say he stayed on the mountain and the clouds came down to meet him. Some people say he ascended to heaven like Mary Poppins. They climbed up all those stairs. And although my wife went to see the new Mary Poppins yesterday, apparently that wasn't in it. I had to stay at home babysitting. But the old Mary Poppins where they climb up in the smoke. So he climbed up to heaven. He was there for 40 days. He was enjoying himself. That's how perhaps we would
The sentence say is in the second time when Moshe asked Hashem shown, you said, you would be under the rock.
By the rock. But that was when he was down already. Okay, we'll talk about that later. Let's just finish off here.
I don't know I don't know where's the rock. But
Okay, we can talk afterwards. So, where was Moshe? Where did he go? You know, it says he went up the mountain. He went up the mountain. The pasuk says, "Vahi Moshe bahar." It says Moshe was on the mountain. Aboim yom v'aboim lali. He was on the mountain for 40 days and 40 nights. But it does say, "Vayichasei ha'onon sheishes yom." In the beginning, it says the cloud covered him for 6 days. Now, I know how Sinai was supposed to be not very tall. So I don't know, maybe they couldn't see him as well. Because, maybe it was tall enough that they couldn't see. Because maybe that's why they were secluded. They had this wall to keep them out. Moshe Rabbeinu went up and he was staying at the top of the mountain. But there's a Gemara in Sukkah, page 5. It says as follows. Trying to talk about the fact that the Shekhinah never comes lower than 10 comes within 10 tfachim, 10 cubits, 10 inches, 15 inches, or whatever it is, of the ground. So it talks about the question, what happened to Moshe Rabbeinu? He was supposed to have gone up. So, this is page 5. Vatanya Rabbi Yossi says, the Shekhinah never came to the floor, literally. And Moshe and Eliyahu, Elijah the prophet, when it says he went up in the chariots, Hashem talking back to heaven alive, they never ascended to heaven. Shenema, as it says in the pasuk, Hashemayim, I quoted you this earlier, Shemayim LaHashem, the heavens are for God. Va'aretz l'san livnei Adam, but the earth is for people. So people live on the earth, not in heaven. So you can't have humans walking around in heaven. If you're in heaven, you're not alive anymore. So you can't have this. You're either here or you're there. You can't have a human walking up in heaven. The real heavens, not in airplanes. The real lofty spheres. Anyway, so therefore the question is, okay, so very nice. You have this pasuk. So where was Moshe? It says he went up. So what does it say? The Shekhinah never came low. Hashem came to Har Sinai, so how can you say he didn't come down? So the Shekhinah rested 10, let's call it 10 inches. Let's call it, and keep it nice and simple, 10 cubits.
40 inches.
40 inches. It rested nice, 40 inches hovering above the top of the mountain. Right? So, how did Moshe ole Elokim? It says Moshe went up to God. So how could you tell me he didn't go up to heaven? Again, Moshe stayed less than, Moshe remained 10 tfachim below the top of the Shekhinah. So the Shekhinah seemed to have come down within 40 inches, and somehow Moshe Rabbeinu was 40 inches below that, so there was this gap. So they never actually met. So what happened? So, where did he learn all this stuff? Who spoke to him? What spoke to him? How did it work? So like the Maharal explains like this, I suppose it's a type of Kabbalistic idea. The famous question, the Jews overslept at Har Sinai. They overslept, they were sleeping. My explanation is as follows. They had 3 days of boarding. It says, get ready, in 3 days Hashem is going to come. So if you tell me Hashem is coming 3 days, I ain't sleeping. Right? I'm all excited. Second day, I'm so excited. And the Gemara says a person can't go 72 hours without sleep. Right? And if a person says, I'm going to make an oath and I'm going to go 72 hours without any sleep, then he's totally annulled it straight away, because somehow there is some few minutes, as I know doctors go a certain amount of time, but there is some sort of REM sleep, I don't know, that your body goes into some sort. It's not possible, people used to say, if you don't sleep for 3 days, you'll die. I said, no, if you don't sleep for 3 days, you'll fall asleep. So, you get the idea. So, everyone's excited. Coming. So after 3 days of not being able to sleep, what happened? They fell asleep. So that's the way I understand that they, it wasn't their fault. They were so excited, but it took 3 days. They fell asleep. So that's how I understand they fell asleep for 3 days. But they overslept. But according to the Maharal, they were trying to understand how on earth is Hashem going to come and give us the Torah? He's going to reveal himself. This is not possible. We're humans. God is God. This is not something that's going to happen. So they thought, we'll sleep. And we know when we sleep, our souls go up to heaven, and we'll sleep. We'll have this outer-body experience while we're sleeping. We'll get the Torah in our sleep. That's what they thought. That makes sense. Hashem's going to come down, speak to me. That doesn't make sense. If I'm sleeping, I'm in some sort of a trance. Yeah, that's what they thought. So That's why they went to sleep, and they thought, Matan Torah is going to happen in their sleep. So that's what they thought. But Hashem came, they saw him, there was this special revelation, whatever that means, they actually saw Hashem. But according to Maral, Moshe Rabbeinu, sleeping beauty, was asleep for 100 years, which is also based on a Gemara in Tanis, which says Rabbi, I've forgotten his name now, there was one rabbi who slept for 70 years, whether that's a motto or not, I don't know. So I think that sleeping beauty is based on that story in the Gemara, where this rabbi fell asleep for 70 years, and he woke up and all his friends were dead, so he asked to die because he had nobody to learn with, but that's another story. So Moshe Rabbeinu literally slept for 40 days. He went up the mountain, and he somehow was in this trance. So he was physically on top of the mountain, the Shekhinah was just above him, and somehow he went into a trance. That's why he didn't eat or sleep for 40 days. It says, Lechem lo achal, he didn't eat bread and drink water because he wasn't awake. He was asleep. Obviously Hashem was sustaining him. So that's how the Maral explains it. He was physically on the mountain, and his soul was ascending to heaven, and that's where Hashem taught him everything, and that's where he got all the information, and perhaps Parshas Mispatim, depending on which opinion you go, trying to bring it back to the beginning. So I hope you've all enjoyed that, a little bit more of an idea and understanding into this week's Parsha. If anyone has any questions, please feel free to stay afterwards, and everyone else is free to leave. So what you wanted to... Right. Vasuli Mishkan Vashochanti Besocha. Right, yeah, you can turn it off. I want to be able to see if I can still record it. Do you want to finish?